But the Border Chronicle Weekly Roundup is where we discuss our latest articles that we've have out this week, and as well as news across from the U.S.-Mexico border region. But as I just said, we're going to talk a bit about these the shooting in Minnesota, the fatal shooting of Renee Good by an ICE agent on Wednesday, and Border Patrol agents shooting 2 people in Portland, Oregon yesterday, both who are being treated in local hospitals, is my understanding. The Portland mayor, Keith Wilson, and the city council called on ICE to end all operations in the city until a full investigation is completed. And they said Portland is not a training ground for militarized agents. And Minnesota elected officials have also said very forcefully that they want these federal agents out of their city. The nonprofit news outlet, The Trace, using gun violence archive data and news reports, has counted 16 incidents since Trump deployed federal agents into cities in which immigration agents shot someone. Another 15 incidents in which agents held someone at gunpoint. And at least 3 people have been shot observing or documenting immigration raids. And 5 people have been shot while driving away from traffic stops. And I mean, for us in the border, who live in border communities, these shootings remind me of so many that we've reported on in the last 2 decades, where border communities have very much been treated as, a training ground for militarized agents. I think of Raymond Matia, a Tohono O'odham tribal member who was fatally shot outside his home by Border Patrol in 2023. And he is just one of 44 people who died that year, according to Southern Border Communities Coalition, after an encounter with Border Patrol. And the Southern Border Communities Coalition has counted at least 335 fatal encounters with CBP since 2010. So it's quite a lot. And as you and I know, Todd, I mean, these agents are almost never prosecuted. And, we've written about many of these shootings. And together, ICE and Border Patrol are part of the largest law enforcement body in the United States, but they have much less oversight and accountability than a city police officer has. They're also led by a political appointee. Right now, it's Kristi Noem, and they're highly susceptible to being politicized. And essentially, right now, they're being modeled into some sort of Trump-stapo, politicized police that do Trump's bidding. In fact, on Monday, I'll be doing a live video with Jen Budd, who's a former Border Patrol agent and now leading reformer for the agency, an activist. And we'll be doing a live video on Monday, which I will post in just a minute after this, where we'll be talking further about Border Patrol accountability and why they haven't been held to account. And of course, now they've received unprecedented funding while lowering their training standards. So $178 billion over the next 4 years to ICE and Border Patrol. So Todd, I mean, you wrote a book about the Border Patrol in 2014 called Border Patrol Nation, which I highly recommend.
You have all of that?
Yeah, I have it here. I have it on my shelf, right behind me, so I can access it at any time. And I remember, you were one of the first people to really write in depth about the Border Patrol and its influence, not just in the U.S., but around the world, which is pretty shocking just how extensive their coverage is of the world. So I'm hoping you can talk a bit about why these agents never get prosecuted and why hasn't Congress done anything to rein them in over the years?
Yeah, all those are very good questions. I think those are questions a lot of people have. I don't think for the shootings, at least with the Border Patrol, I believe with ICE as well, there has not been any prosecutions. I know the one there's a big one around Arizona, southern Arizona, from October of 2012. Jose Antonio Elena Rodriguez, who was fatally shot 10 times by a Border Patrol agent who shot from the U.S. side into Mexico. And that one, I believe, it climbed the echelons of the courts, and the Border Patrol agent who shot Jose Antonio by the name of Lonnie Schwartz. It was thought that he might get prosecuted for that, but he wasn't. He was not prosecuted, and it just goes into this impunity, this impunity that surrounds the Border Patrol that we see, as you said, Melissa, in the border zones. Yeah, and looking at the border zone too, as that 100-mile jurisdiction that some have called, or like I know people have I don't want to say it because the
Yeah.
Constitution still is in effect here, but a
Right.
constitutional mangled zone, right? Where
Yeah.
a CBP official told me in Washington that he told me we are exempt from the Fourth Amendment. So this extra constitutional, we're beyond the law sort of power that you see Border Patrol enacting, and the non-prosecutions of the violence and the killings, and then also in just the legal framework and how they even express it. And it's super interesting that, when you take that into account and take what we've reported on and others, border journalists have reported on for so many years, and then observe what's going on today, like observe this sort of, I guess, expansion, you could say, of the borderlands going into the interior of the country, or going into the border zones that are not normally thought about too much, like the southern border zone. Now we're in Minnesota or in Portland, and those two locales are super interesting too, because in 2020, after George Floyd, CBP flew drones over Minnesota when people were protesting. And then in 2020, BORTAC, which is a Border Patrol SWAT unit, um, grabbed protesters right off the streets in these places that are officially in this 100-mile zone, if you look at the country. But also exemplifying what you're saying, that what is this border unit that's extra constitutional, that thinks of itself above and beyond the law, and they're shooting people in the face, or shooting
Yeah.
at people like this married couple in Portland who were just last night. What on earth is happening? And it seems like what we've seen on the border is now is happening widespread across the country.
Right. And we saw a real spike of fatal shootings by Border Patrol after this big push to bring on new agents by, lowering the training standards. And was that under Bush? That was under Bush, wasn't it?
The
George W.
Yeah, the hiring surge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was on. It went. I think it was 2006 to 2009. So it started with Bush
Mhm.
and then went into the beginnings of Obama.
Yeah, yeah, so we saw this big hiring surge where they lowered the standards, for training, and then a huge spike in fatal shootings, and, like the one that you just spoke of with Jose Elena, and we saw US Border Patrol agents shooting into Mexico, killing people in Mexico, and, I
I
mean, that
remember one with a picnic. There was a picnic. People were at a picnic, and Border
yeah.
Patrol shot right into the picnic.
That was the Pedraza case. A lot of these happened in Texas that I reported on around, 2012. Between 2010, 2012, there was a big spike in fatal shootings and US agents shooting people in Mexico, which is insane. I mean, if that were to happen the other way around, it would be,
Imagine.
imagine
Yes.
if a Mexican army or policeman shot a US citizen from across the border, And in Texas, there's of course a river between the US and Mexico. So they're shooting across the river. I mean, I covered a case there in Laredo, the one that you just mentioned, where an agent was on a boat in the river, shot a man in Nuevo Laredo while he was barbecuing with his family and killed him in front of his kids. Um, and the Supreme Court ruled that if you were shot in Mexico, you had no jurisdiction in the US to be able to file a case against these US agents. So it's yeah, it's been there's been these continuous pushes from border communities for some sort of reform in, the Border Patrol. And, it seemed like they were making some leeway a few years ago, but then it all sort of fell by the wayside once the Trump administration took over. I mean, I don't know what else could you say about that reform, with perf and all that reform movement that happened a few years back.
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, for a real reform for me personally to believe like a real reform is in effect is like, well, it would be like that somebody would be prosecuted for one of these shootings, right? um the fact that this seems to be the shield of impunity. I mean, I think it's grand and it's good, and there's a push for that. There's a push to have some sort of accountability for for the violence, and it just, but I just can't I keep going back to geographer Reese Jones' book called Violent Borders, and his whole thesis in this book is that this is innately violent. Like the whole apparatus, there's a violence that's innately in it. It's and um and to reform that, it seems like what it seems like, while yes, it definitely should be pushed for sure. Is it will it solve the innate violence that's entrapped, or is a big part of the thrust of it? I don't. That's where I have a little bit of, that's where I kind of go back and forth on this.
Yeah, I guess the saying that was going around a lot during the first Trump administration was cruelty is the point, and it seems with Trump 2.0, it's violence is the point. That is the underlying intention of these deployments into, US communities. And then the wild thing is, with the fatal shooting of Renee Good, it was very well documented by people there who were documenting this ICE raid. And yet, Kristi Noem and the Trump administration are doubling down on these lies, right? That on disinformation that she like intentionally tried to run them over. She was a domestic terrorist. And then they have taken the Minnesota police out of the investigation and put the FBI in charge of it. So it doesn't bode well for any kind of like, fair investigation or justice.
Yeah, and unfortunately, then that's going to follow. I mean, it's more egregious now. I mean, thinking what Noam and Trump and co are doing, but it's also following the impunity.
Mhm.
That kind of shield of impunity for these federal agents, these immigration enforcement agents, whether it's ICE or Border Patrol, and they can get away with madness.
Yeah, to the point of where they're telling people not to believe their own eyes with the video that
Exactly. Like anyone
they've
can
seen
go and watch
themselves.
that video that happened in Minnesota. It's right there. I mean, doesn't
Yeah,
take a detective to figure that one out.
and see with your own eyes, and yet they're gonna tell us something else, and, expect us to believe it, uh, which is really something.
And that's the
Um
thing too, like you always write about, Melissa, like the disinformation and that sort of repetition of something, even though you have all this evidence, that's one thing, the repetition, and then it's just kind of I guess what the gaslighting or whatever, like you don't no longer believe what you see before your very eyes.
Yeah, and this is something that they very much worked on during the Biden administration at the border in really creating this other narrative of invasion and violence. When people were coming to seek protection, coming to seek asylum, that they were invaders, and there was a lot of content creation made. Trump came to the border, Elon Musk was at the border. They spent a lot of time at the Texas border creating this kind of dystopian content creation and really building that ecosystem of right wing influencers who are now employed by the US government as, propagandists to push this alternative narrative, to make way for these deployments of armed agents and soldiers. Although it does seem like the soldiers thing is becoming less because the courts are ruling, against these deployments of soldiers to different cities, which is good. But we still have, you know, ICE and Border Patrol, the largest law enforcement body in the country, who's getting more money, more people, and, less training, less restraint, less accountability. So, I wanted to touch on your Q&A. The other big story, of course, is Venezuela, and I'm curious how what's happening in Venezuela will eventually affect the border, right? Are we going to see more people coming from Venezuela seeking protection here because of the, unrest in Venezuela? But you talked to Gabriel Aguirre. He's a Latin American organizer for World Beyond War. He's a Venezuelan, about the situation there. And what was your takeaway from your conversation with Gabriel?
Yeah, it was a very interesting conversation. I was wanted to talk to him immediately right after the U.S. basically attacked Venezuela, like in a war situation, and then abducted their president and first lady,
Yeah.
right? Um, so what I really wanted to talk to Gabriel Aguirre about was the what was like specifically about the United States and its relationship with Venezuela, and also like what we're just talking about, like the U.S. border in a lot of ways and how it expands outward from the United States, and how it seems to me that you can make a very good argument that this border is now on the shores of Venezuela, and it was before this. In the violent nature of it, like you could see with the bombings of the boats, that have killed over 100 people, um, and so I was really wanted to talk to Aguirre about all of this stuff and just get some insight about that particular relationship with the United States. And he really lays it out, over the years, the decades. I mean, there's a decade long, thing going on between the United States and Venezuela, really going back to Hugo Chavez, who was the president from 2 decades ago, right? And and looking at like previous coup attempts as well, and just kind of looking at all of that, but then superimposing the Trump administration, and particularly
Mhm.
looking at the national security strategy
Yeah.
of the Trump administration put out in November of
Mhm.
last year. And one of the things now people should go and read this thing, because I haven't
Oh
read it.
my god,
It's
I mean, just the introduction where they talk about the woke lunacy of the armed forces and the invasion of our country under the Biden administration. I mean, it's like this crazy town Mad Libs, the intro. It's very histrionic.
yeah, go read it. Entertaining. For,
Uh, and
uh,
it's frightening is what it is. It's
It's
really
frightening.
frightening.
Yeah, it's frightening. Um, but one part of it that I really focused on with Gabrielle in this piece was the Trump corollary. And there's a whole
Yeah.
section, it's called the Trump corollary, and it's the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. And people probably remember you have to go back to the 19th century U.S. imperialism really to come to terms with what the Monroe Doctrine is. But it's basically that the United States rules Latin America, that no other country can come in and do anything. This is the United States backyard. This is where the idea that Latin America, Caribbean is a U.S. backyard. So now in the U.S. national security strategy, the Monroe Doctrine is evoked again with this Trump corollary, and it's totally. You look at what happened in Venezuela, and Aguirre definitely speaks to this in this interview that we published on Thursday. That it's following this corollary step by step, exactly what they're saying. The drug trafficking charges,
Yeah.
and enacting allies in and actually I think it's in this case it's a militarism and border militarization. You look at both of those things almost as the same entity, right? And you see both, because when I see that, it's like stopping migration is a big part of it. Of course, stopping drug trafficking, the terrorism charges as well, that are enacted. Um, and so we do talk about a little bit about that too.
Yeah.
It seems to be the first, like, the strategy came out in November. Now it's this January 3rd. Happy New Year, bombing Venezuela, right? And
Yeah.
then Aguirre mentions that, Venezuela is only like the first on this list of countries that are receiving such threats. Nicaragua is in there. Colombia is in there. There's other countries that are in this. So
Mexico is
Mex,
very, very concerning. Very
yeah,
concerning
yeah.
because they have been saber rattling towards Mexico for a long time. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is something we will definitely keep our nose to the ground at Border Chronicle about this. It seems, as far as border externalization is concerned, like the push out of the U.S. border, it seems like this is the beginning of a new era of it. Like, to keep a close eye on, and I think we'll just keep doing that. This Venezuela. I mean, obviously, we definitely have to keep an eye on Venezuela and what's going on there. But it seems like, from what I've heard from people, it just happened. Still, it's January 3rd, so less than a week ago. Um, the idea of more out migration coming from Venezuela is a thing.
Yeah.
Um, so we'll probably keep our eyes peeled for those sorts of dynamics as well.
Yeah, so we have the administration attacking both domestically, internally within the country, and externally as well into Latin America and other areas. Yeah, so that is quite a start to 2026.
Yeah. I, I always wonder, was it done on purpose on January 3rd for that reason? Like, here's 2026 is here. Oh, by the way, bam, we're gonna frame this year, and this is boom, we're doing this, and boom, we're doing that, and expect more of this. I don't know. Those now we're in speculative ground, but it seems.
Yeah, yeah, and there's so much
uh,
speculation, but I mean, it's midterm elections this year, so it's gonna get worse for sure.
yeah, the
It's
midterms.
it's gonna be a very, very volatile year. But I did wanna end, this video on some good news, which is like, you know, take some work to find, but, I wrote in our first article of the year that, by the end of the month, we'll have a new redesigned site up on the Ghost newsletter platform, so we're leaving Substack. Ghost is a nonprofit that it doesn't take venture capital funding, so it's gonna make us more independent. We're not gonna be, branded as a Substack or anything like that. We're just gonna be our own, entity, the Border Chronicle. And if all goes well, our subscribers are not even gonna notice this migration. So there's nothing to worry about. They're going to migrate our stuff over to Ghost, and we're gonna have a new redesigned site, which is very exciting. And Caroline Tracy, who wrote for us last year and is just this amazing, really smart person who lives here in Tucson. She goes between Tucson and Mexico quite a bit. She's gonna be, doing more arts and culture reporting and environmental reporting, and also serving as an editor to bring in more arts and culture, writing from in different perspectives from people, across the border region. And we're also fundraising to keep Pablo de la Rosa in 2026, who's just been a wonderful contribution from South Texas. Pablo's done some really great reporting for us in the last year, and we want to keep him this year. So we're fundraising to do that because we're an independent, scrappy, upstart publication. And we're going to be adding some new features and reporting on our new site because we are covering the entire region. That's almost 2,000 miles. You know, So, um, so there'll be a lot more new ways to support our work on the new site. And, we're membership supported, so we rely on our readers and listeners, to our podcast as well to support our work so we can expand our coverage across the border. And so if you'd like to know more about our exciting plans for the future, our redesign, you can check out the article that I wrote this week, and I'll publish that in our roundup right after this video. And also, we're talking about some of the stories that we'll be focusing on this year. You covered this at the Border Expo in Phoenix, which will be, you go every year, and where the Trump cabinet members talked about running mass deportation like a business, like Amazon. So now the Washington Post is reporting that they're going to open up large warehouses to hold people along those lines of treating people like Amazon packages, and two of those warehouses would be in Texas and Arizona. We're going to be looking at the drought and the dwindling Rio Grande, which is something that you've been looking into quite a bit, and we'll have a book out about in the coming year. And the further militarization of the border. We now have these national defense areas and border communities, and it's now more than a third of the border is now under military control. The most recent one was just opened in California. So there's not been a lot of reporting on that, I feel like, because so much has been happening in the interior of the country and now, you know, with invading various countries.
Yeah. Next, by the way, stay tuned for next week. Have a big report on autonomous license plate readers and the kind of advances in technologies that we're seeing as well. There's new layers of technology and new layers of enforcement that's going to happen very soon. This report will be out next week.
Yeah, that's a lot of what we're also focusing on is the construction of the border wall, which is really happening now at a very quick pace across the entire border. And as Todd is saying, and I'm really looking forward to your report. And this is a collaboration with the Arizona Mirror, correct?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, looking at expanding surveillance in the borderlands. So we hope you all will tune in for that um, in the coming weeks. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. And I'll post this roundup shortly. All right.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.